The cold air outside the Seattle café seeped through the glass windows like a reminder that some people were meant to face life alone, no matter how hard they tried not to. Harper Wilson sat at the small wooden table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she wasn't even drinking anymore. Every minute that passed felt heavier than the last. She kept glancing at the door, hoping, praying that the man she had agreed to meet would walk in and smile, maybe wave shyly, and say he was sorry for being late. But reality wasn't that kind. She watched couples laugh at nearby tables, watched families share pastries, watched strangers move on with their normal lives, while she sat stuck in the familiar ache of being unwanted. The truth pressed down on her chest like a weight. This wasn't the first time she had been stood up, and somewhere deep down, she feared it wouldn't be the last. If you're watching this, and you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in love that finds us when we least expect it, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Harper tried to smile at the barista who passed by, but even that smile trembled. She had promised herself she would try dating again, even though her past relationships had left bruises she couldn't show. Her last boyfriend, Darren, had walked out of her life after 2 years together, telling her she was too much work and emotionally exhausting. Those words still stung every time she looked in the mirror. So when her friend convinced her to try a blind date with a supposedly good Christian dad named Matthew, she had forced herself to be hopeful. But now, sitting alone in a warm cafe that felt colder by the second, she wondered why she had expected anything different. She slowly rose from her chair, telling herself it was over. Enough waiting, enough hoping. She slid her purse strap over her shoulder and turned toward the door. But then something unusual happened. 2 little boys wearing matching red jackets rushed inside, their curls bouncing as they scanned the cafe with urgency. They couldn't have been more than 7. They looked around until both of them locked eyes with her at the same moment, and then, without hesitation, they ran straight toward her table. Before Harper could understand what was happening, one of the boys gently tugged her sleeve while the other climbed onto the seat across from where she had been sitting. Their faces were flushed from the cold, but their eyes sparkled with sincerity. The boy beside her touched her hand lightly and said in a soft voice that shook her heart, "Dad picked you, not anyone else." The other nodded firmly and added, "He's sorry he's late. Really sorry." Harper froze. She didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or run. The words, so innocent, so direct, hit her harder than anything she'd heard in a long time. She slowly sat back down, placing her purse beside her trembling hand. The boys introduced themselves as Jonah and Micah, twin brothers with bright spirits that didn't seem dimmed by the world yet. They explained that their dad had to park the car far down the street because the lot was full, and he'd sent them ahead so she wouldn't leave. Harper felt something warm building in her chest, something she had forgotten the feeling of. She noticed how the boys' jackets matched perfectly, how their hair curled around their ears, how their small faces were earnest as they reassured her. For the first time in years, she felt seen. A moment later, a tall man entered the cafe, slightly out of breath, running a hand through his dark hair as his eyes searched anxiously around the room. When he saw his sons sitting beside Harper, he paused, as if overwhelmed by relief. He approached the table slowly, almost cautiously, and Harper felt her heart pick up speed. The man introduced himself as Matthew Hayes, her blind date. He apologized sincerely, explaining how the morning had gone wrong, how he'd spilled coffee on his shirt, how traffic had been backed up for miles, and how he had been terrified that she'd think he wasn't serious. Harper listened, surprised at how gentle his voice was and how much sincerity lived in his eyes. He admitted he had been scared too. Dating after losing his wife 3 years ago had been hard. He didn't know how to balance loneliness, fatherhood, and hope, but he wanted to try. He wanted to meet someone who wouldn't see his kids as a burden. When he said that, Harper's chest tightened. She looked at the boys, swinging their legs on the seat, their faces full of trust, and something inside her softened. The cafe suddenly felt warmer. The minutes turned into an hour as they talked. Harper shared little pieces of her life, the good parts and the ones that had hurt. Matthew listened quietly, compassion shaping every expression on his face. His sons giggled as they told her silly stories about their school, their dog, and how their dad always burned pancakes. Harper found herself laughing, really laughing, the kind she hadn't experienced since before heartbreak had settled into her bones. The afternoon light shifted, painting the table with a pale glow. Matthew asked if she wanted another cup of coffee, and she said yes, surprising even herself. But it wasn't just the coffee she was saying yes to. It was warmth, connection, possibility. She watched the way Matthew looked at his boys, how much affection lived in his eyes, how tenderly he adjusted Jonah's collar and wiped chocolate from Micah's cheek. She hadn't seen a man this kind in a long time. She wondered if kindness was still allowed to exist in her life. Outside, the wind brushed softly against the window, scattering a few leaves that clung to the sidewalk. Inside, Harper's heart felt like it was slowly learning how to breathe again. As the hours passed, something changed. It was subtle at first, a feeling that maybe life hadn't abandoned her completely. Matthew confessed that he had almost canceled the date because he was afraid she'd reject him once she realized he came with a full package. Harper looked at the boys again and whispered that they were the most beautiful part of him. Matthew's eyes glistened for a moment before he looked down, overcome. The boys asked if Harper would walk with them to the nearby park before they headed home. Harper hesitated, afraid of letting herself get attached too fast. But Matthew's hopeful smile broke down her resistance. They walked side by side, the twins running ahead as leaves crunched under their feet. Harper felt a peace she wasn't prepared for. The park, the chilly breeze, the sound of children laughing. It felt like a world she had once belonged to and was slowly returning to. Matthew watched her as she pushed Jonah on the swing and helped Micah zip up his jacket. Something in him softened too. He had told himself he would never love again, not fully. But seeing Harper interact with his kids unlocked something he had buried long ago. When the sun began to set, he insisted on walking her to her car. The boys clung to her legs as if they had known her far longer than just a few hours. Harper squeezed them gently, her eyes misting. She hadn't realized how deeply she had needed affection, belonging, and simple human warmth. Before leaving, Matthew whispered that he hoped this wasn't the last time he saw her. Harper nodded, unable to speak. That night, Harper lay in bed replaying the entire day. The moment she had thought her date would be another heartbreak, the moment two little boys in red jackets had run to her like she mattered, the moment she had allowed herself to believe in something fragile and beautiful again. She realized she had walked into that cafe expecting disappointment, and somehow she had walked out with hope. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps keep these emotional kindness stories alive. Before the ending, please comment below. Kindness still exists. Sometimes the most beautiful beginnings walk into our lives wearing red jackets, carrying innocence, honesty, and a message that changes everything. Dad picked you, not anyone else.